Myths Defined by Endo podcast with your host and endometriosis warrior, Teniola Ogunro. Created for and dedicated to women who have been diagnosed with endometriosis or who suffer from symptoms that they suspect to be caused by endometriosis. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for a weekly dose on everything endo. If you find this podcast inspiring, please share with your friends and family. Let's spread the word and inspire and empower women all over the world. Please note that I am not a medical professional, so whatever I share on this podcast is to raise awareness and inspire. Please always speak to your medical professional before making any major changes to your diet or lifestyle. With that said, let's get right to it.
Today's episode means a lot to me. This is the first time I am speaking to an endo sister. I am both excited and scared because we will be talking about fertility. It is a heavy topic, but we need to talk about it. Statistics say that 1 in 4 pregnancies result in miscarriage and 1 in 8 women are experiencing infertility. So even if you are not experiencing it, someone you know might. Having endometriosis means you might be dealing with pain on a near daily basis, and this is hard enough, but adding infertility to the mix just feels like cruelty. I will be chatting to Kunbi Odubogun today. Kunbi is an attorney and founder of lifestyle publication Perfête. She is a miracle mama and recent founder of TTFC, a community for those trying to freaking conceive. Today's chat follows her journey from being diagnosed with endo to finally having her baby. She had to go through IVF a few times to have her bundle of joy, and as I am on this journey myself, I would love to hear all about it. Join me today as we hear straight from an endo sister's mouth, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So sit back, relax, and let's have a listen.
So lovely to finally meet you and talk to you on the show. Yeah, the first endo sister I'm actually interviewing.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Oh
yes,
goodness.
So yay. I'm excited to learn about your story and how you've been able to live and thrive despite endo. So let's start.
Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do this. So can you tell us a bit about your journey from being diagnosed with endometriosis to having your beautiful baby boy?
Whew, wow, that's a mouthful. Actually,
I know.
Like, the question was coming, but still, it's actually a lot. So I've always had bad periods. Actually, from like when I can remember, I've always had bad periods. I've always been that person in my friends group that has the worst kind of periods. You know what I mean? Like it's a situation where like I can't leave my house. I can't do anything. I have heavy periods and they are painful. Since I came, I've been in America for a long time. I can't count, but like since I was like 18, I've been having horrible periods. And when I was in law school, it got really bad. Like that was, I would say, about like 2008, 2009. It was intense. It was periods that like I wouldn't be able to move. One of my friends, so I used to say it all the time, like, okay, no, this is not normal. This is not how everybody else is living. Like we say we have periods, but it's not like this.
Yeah.
But, I think that was the first time I heard a whisper of endometriosis, like maybe like, if you Google really hard or something, somebody would say like, oh, one of the reasons could be this. I used to go to the doctor, they'd give me like harder pain prescription, like pain pills or whatever, get me through the period, but nobody ever really said that, okay, this is what you have, or this is how we're going to do it, or whatever. One of my really close friends also then maybe like in 2010 got diagnosed with endometriosis. And because she used to have just as bad periods as me, like we would be comparing notes about what kind of period I was having or things like that. So she had her doctor told her immediately that, okay, you know what, you may have endometriosis. We can't tell because we would have to open you up to be able to tell. And so they opened her up, they found stage 1 endometriosis, and they took care of it. And I just remember thinking, wow, like I remember her life afterwards, and it was just like, wait, are you kidding? Like, we're not on the same level anymore. We've left.
Wow.
But then I think also, like, some of us, and I'm sure a lot of people out there are always afraid about going to the doctor and actually confirming what your diagnosis is,
Yes.
because you don't know how to handle it, especially when
very true.
When you know that it's surgery related, or like, you know, there's going to have to be something to open up. I had never until that point had surgery before. So as I think I knew deep down that something was wrong, but I didn't want to find out that something was wrong, if that makes any sense.
That makes sense.
And I haven't regretted something so much in my life, because, like, as I would find out, endometriosis is one of those, it's a time-sensitive issue in the sense that it gets worse.
Yeah, it does.
As you grow older in your reproductive years, the endometriosis continues to feed. And so the sooner it's been able to be taken care of, the better for everybody. And I wish I had, that was 10 years ago, and I wish I had done something about it then. So like so I continued. I met my husband. He actually knew about my period pains. Like, everybody around me, even not just like, you know, like my family and everything, like, it always just sounded like I was saying, Kunbi just has a bad period. You know what I mean? Nobody really took it as, okay, something is really wrong with you. My little sister actually also has always gone through that kind of pain. And another thing that I should mention, obviously, is that, you know, endometriosis, they suspect that endometriosis is, you know, it can run in family, like within the female in a family. My mother did not have any period pain, so she was just confused as to where this was coming from.
Going on.
So I got married in 2012. I still hadn't been diagnosed with endometriosis then. I'd been diagnosed with IBS, I think, and lactose intolerance. So
that's really popular and
was
common as well. For people that have endometriosis. They say it's IBS.
Yeah, they say it's IBS because obviously your body's irritable, there's some inflammation. So I mean, I took my lactose intolerance and IBS diagnosis, and I've gone with that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I in 2014 I had gone to Nigeria for a wedding, and I came home and my period has started getting worse than usual. For my period to get worse is like, I don't even know what scale to compare it to, because you already think that you've hit rock bottom with the pain, but when you're like, everybody in your office knows that Kunbi is not coming to work this week because she is on some excessive pain and excessive bleeding, so let's just not worry about it. But then it started happening where it wouldn't be my period, but all of a sudden I wouldn't be able to sit up. Like, my pain is so bad that I'm lying on my stomach because I can't breathe, and it's like a sharp pain, which is similar, I guess, to someone that's having a really extreme episode of IBS or lactose intolerance. But it was to the point that I could not move. I called the OBGYN I was using then, and he said he was on vacation and he will catch me in December. This was October. Wow. So I'm like, okay, cool, no problem, just lie down. You just keep going through this thing, take some pain medicine. Well, this was going on, and there was a point I was with one of my friends, and actually two of our best friends had come to visit us. They were staying with us, and I literally had to excuse myself because the pain was so much. I didn't come down. I went upstairs and I just never came back down. They had to leave because I'm sure they were wondering, wait, what's, like, maybe I don't, what kind of awkward conversation is this? Like, literally in the middle of the conversation, my pain was so sharp. It felt like 7,000 knives were stabbing me non-stop. So I went up there, and then that's when I just Googled, like, OBGYN. I need an appointment immediately. And I wasn't even on my period. My period had passed about a week or 10 days after that. So I was like, okay, something is wrong with me, and I obviously can't play with it anymore, especially when I don't know what it is. So I spoke to, I was able to get an appointment with him, a doctor that was actually maybe 10 minutes away from me. And I went to him, and I just remember I actually went with my sister, I believe. And I remember going in there, and he was just so, like, I was thinking, this man doesn't have a very good bedside manner. He was so direct. Like, why is he so, like, geez, like, okay, like, why are you talking to me like this? But then he was so matter of fact, and he wasn't, like, you could see in his eyes that it wasn't like he was coming from a bad place. But he sat down with me for like 5 minutes, and you're just listening to what I was talking about. Mind you, I'm still leaning forward, like, in pain. And he's like, you have endometriosis. And I look at him like, okay, calm down now. Like, you don't talk to me like that. The way he said to me, it was almost as if he was accusing me of something. Like, you have endometriosis. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
I may or may not have it. I don't know. He's like, okay, just hold on 1 minute. We're going to do an ultrasound. Because this pain sounds like it could possibly be a cyst. And so he checks, and it's a chocolate cyst, which is obviously something that's indicative of endometriosis or endometrioma, a cyst related from the endometriosis. And apparently what had been happening for the past 10 days was that my blood was backing up. Because of my endometriosis being in other places, the blood is backing up into a cyst around my ovary. And immediately he puts in whatever it's called for the ultrasound, he could see that cyst bulging out. So he said, for sure you have endometriosis. And what I'm going to do, because actually, I believe it was an 8 centimeter cyst that was sitting on my right ovary, like attached to my right ovary. And he felt that, it was attached to my right ovary, and I had to have surgery to get it removed. And then he said he would open me up and see what other endometriosis was there.
Okay.
So that was October. So we scheduled the surgery pretty fast. And the first couple of weeks in December, my mom flew in, because obviously this is surgery. And I was just this was the thing I was dreading, because I'd never had any kind of surgery before. I was deathly afraid of general anesthesia, because you don't know what this thing is. And being the Nigerian that I am, the way I thought about general anesthesia is like, oh my god, so what about if I don't wake up? It's just really scary. The whole idea of being controlled by something is a fear. And so I remember it like it was yesterday, and that was 5 years ago. But in December, so I did the surgery in December, and the doctor spoke to me afterwards, and he's like, oh, he did as much as he could, but that when he opened me up, the endometriosis was excessive. It was a lot. And that he's just thinking about how long this has been going on. Obviously, I'd been having periods for probably 14 years of my life at that point, I'm assuming. So it was a lot of endometriosis. It had covered everything from my bowels. They couldn't find my appendix.
Wow.
And the endometrioma, the cyst that they had found, had glued both my ovaries together. So it was just it was basically a free for all in there. But he said he was just going to try and do what he could to get everything out. He did it he said he did, but he made sure that he left about maybe 2 centimeters? I can't remember what the measurement was, but a little bit of the endometriosis left, because he didn't want to damage my ovaries. Because actually, up until that point, my husband and I were not necessarily, it wasn't trying, but we were not trying to not try. I don't know how to explain it.
That makes sense.
That casual moment when you're like, okay, you know what, we'll try for a year, no pressure at all. It's not really that we're trying. Let's not even think about it. And obviously it had occurred to me that, listen, I'm not pregnant yet, what's going on? But it wasn't really a priority in my brain. That's what it was. The pain was the priority for me. And it was I was 28, it's not a thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so he said, obviously, you're a young married couple, you are going to probably want children. So he didn't want to damage anything, which was great. Another thing about when you're going through endometriosis surgery, you don't really have time to have conversations about what they should or shouldn't do there, because you're under. But I am very grateful for that man, for not only being well versed in endometriosis, knowing what to look for, knowing what he was going to do, but for also doing as much as possible to get as much out as possible, because endometriosis always obviously has the risk of growing again, and that's its own thing. So that was 2014, like I said, and then we broached the question. Asked him about, trying to conceive, how is this going to affect me? He said, well, endometriosis surgery is surgery, and a lot of you can't really see, especially since I had so much of the endometriosis, that you can't really predict how your body's going to react afterwards. Your body's been, especially since it's been so inflamed for so long, and there are a lot of adhesions, and because a lot of stuff had to be taken out. Yeah, you don't know how your body's going to react to I might struggle with getting pregnant. So he said to try for 6 months, come back, and see if we might need a fertility specialist, at least somebody to talk to that could monitor our plans towards having a baby. So that's that was my story up until I started properly trying to have a baby.
Okay. One question I was going to ask is, was it ablation surgery?
No, I had an excision surgery. So it was full surgery. It was cut out. And that was the great thing. I mean, one thing that I did search when I was looking, I didn't know I suspected, like I said, that I had endometriosis, but I was very particular about at least finding someone that knew about endometriosis. and Dr. Heading in Stanford did know about endometriosis. It actually was one of the things that he had mentioned there. So when he said endometriosis so cavalierly, he's like, yes. And he also told me that, you know what, I am well versed in endometriosis. So this is like, because he said if he didn't know and if it was something else, then he would have recommended me to someone else to handle it.
Okay.
I was lucky in that case because, to be honest, I'm the kind of person that just kind of goes with things like really fast. Like I don't really pause too much in the process, which is really horrible. But like, I'm glad that he was able to let me know that information because I didn't do enough legwork. I didn't verse myself well on the endometriosis issue to say that, oh, this is where I didn't know the difference between ablation and excision is what I'm getting at. So like, I'm glad that
basically lucky that I was
lucky, exactly, because I could have ended up with someone that was going to do ablation, and then it would just be a situation where I was just doing it over and over again.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, amazing. So so now the story from that point to the fertility journey, can you tell me a bit more?
Of course, yes. So so that we tried for a year and nothing had happened. We were now, I believe, so we're now about 3 years into our marriage, and I had to move states. We moved states. Okay. So we decided that, okay, you know what, we won't do anything for now. Like we've tried all this, we've tried all the natural ways of, you know, getting pregnant. Like when we move to the new place, we will have to see someone. Like the doctor actually told us when we went to him one last time, and he's like, oh, here is your document. He printed out everything and also said he's ready to send it out to anybody. And you know, one thing, like when you have endometriosis, your documents start to pile up because you start to have your own little bit of portfolio.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the situation where anybody that has any kind of chronic pain or chronic illness at all. So he gave me documents, and then I found, as usual again, I tried to find on Google like a fertility expert that we were going to be able to use. And we found one near our house, and that's where my journey actually really started. Like I said, I did not really verse myself with what endometriosis was and what the like ramifications for anything was in terms of, you know, the flare-ups. In my head initially, how I thought about it is that they've taken it out, so I should be able to get pregnant. Yeah. But obviously that's not the situation. There's a lot of stuff. It could be the situation for a lot of people. Some people are lucky enough that the endometriosis is gone, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're able to get pregnant because they've taken away whatever the barrier was. But then some people, especially people that have had it sitting there for a while, like you don't know what the long-term damage is that has happened beneath the scenes, because endometriosis has roots. It has roots inside. So it's like, you know, like that's why they always say that you don't do ablation in the first place, because it's just scraping things off, but it's not really taking care of the rooted disease. So I went to my new specialist, let him know about the endometriosis, and he's like, okay, you know what? You're fresh off surgery, like a year out. So your body's still, you know, like free of all of that. You don't seem to be having any pains or, well, I was still having pains. That's something I should mention, but it wasn't as bad as before. Like after my surgery, I was having pains, but it was just regular period pains now. At least what I'm hoping other people were really experiencing as their regular period pains.
And nothing outside of your periods.
No, nothing outside of my period. Nothing outside of my period. I even felt better. Like my bowels didn't hurt as much. Like my stomach wasn't hurting at random like periods anymore, because I had a lot of endometriosis on my bowels apparently. So the doctor tried, the first few, he just did like a bunch of testing. And he did something called a Clomid, I think, like receptivity test or something like that. It was for infertility now. And it became one of those things where you're just testing, like, you know, he says a lot of people get pregnant when they do this Clomid test, like because your body's like, you know, sensitive to all the hormones, like there's a high chance that even during this testing you get pregnant. So I was so excited. I'm like, this is going to make it so much easier. Just like in my head, I'd always just thought, like, once I see a fertility expert, once I see a fertility doctor, once he puts hormones in me, that's all I need for to get pregnant. And that was a joke, because that didn't work out. Obviously, I was really devastated, but I was disappointed. And but then he's like, you know, and that's when he started to explain more about what the endometriosis situation is. He's like, you know, endometriosis is not something that everybody, like, even they don't have enough knowledge about what it is. It's the way he described it to me was that it's an unknown. it's an unknown, and so you can't predict how it's going to behave. And endometriosis is different in everybody. Also, they can't tell if you have endometriosis in your tubes. They can only tell on the endometriosis that they can see, like whether it's microscopically or whatever it is. So like I could still have endometriosis down there somewhere, and it's just like, you know, like nobody would know. And then things started to come out from there. Like after the Clomid thing didn't work, they did something called a hysterosapinogram, which is basically a check of your tubes to make sure that your tubes are like to see that your plumbing is basically working. So to see that no tube is blocked and that there's not anything that, you know, causing tremors or anything like that in your system. My tubes were clear, so that was great. And so they were like, okay, yeah, so at least you know that that's moving or whatever. But then they also saw that my right ovary wasn't really responding to much. Like my tubes were working, but that it seemed like I had a lazy ovary, in the sense I wasn't really responding. But if you remember, like that's where the cyst was, and that was where they did most of that surgery. So it was like, okay, you see, like we've seen that you have endometriosis. We've seen that, you know, like your body's not really responding, like you're not getting pregnant. So it's up to you to decide. With endometriosis, they would recommend IVF. I believe he recommended IVF right away. After like I had tried for like another couple of months, and they were like, oh, it's endometriosis, it's what it is. And so that was where we left things. I started IVF in November of 2015. And I was so excited because it was like, this is the final lap. But this IVF, like at the end of the day, what again? Like this is what, like in my head, it was always it's the celebrity's choice for guaranteeing having a baby, regardless of how old you are. Are you kidding? And I'm 29. Like this is not a thing. Like it's not a problem. So I started IVF then, and everything was like, the whole IVF process is very involved, and it involves a lot of monitoring, which was great. But like, you know, you get injected, you go through a lot of injections every day. I'd say about 3 or 4, and depending on what your situation is. And so they just keep monitoring you to make sure that those injections are actually like, you know, making an impact on your body or your eggs, and your body's responding to it. And so like I was going, and I was doing my injections, my Follistim, and I believe what I was using then was Menopure. And we were going to the doctor, and I think the first time I went, the doctor was like, oh, look, you have follicles, which is, I guess, the handles of where the eggs will come out from. And I was so excited because I was like, okay, at least my body's responding to the hormones. Like, this is great and it's good. And then the next, I think I went 3 days later, or maybe 5 days later. And he said that, okay, your follicles are not, they're growing, but they're not growing at the same rate. And that one of them was looking like it was ready to mature, like basically ready to mature way faster than the other ones. So they're going to try and tamper it down a bit for a couple of days and see where it went. Anyways, to cut the long story short, for that cycle, I went again, and then he had said that it looked like I was only producing 1 egg, like one follicle was responding to all the medication that they were giving. And that unfortunately they would not be able to do IVF with, like, they can't guarantee
cycle.
So they were going to have to convert the cycle into an IUI cycle and just hope for the best. Because at the end of the day, you know, like, it's still, you've done all the legwork for the treatment. So like chances are that the IUI would still result in a pregnancy. It's possible. So of course, my optimistic self, as usual, I was like, yep, maybe that's what God wants. Like, maybe I'm not supposed to go through this whole process. Do you know what I mean? Like, the IUI is just going to work. I was supposed to go home for a wedding. I stayed back because I needed to, like, I must be pregnant. And, like, I didn't want to mess anything up. I don't want to go anywhere. And anything
just like, be very careful. No exercise. Nothing. Don't do anything.
There was no legwork. I was lying down. I waited, and well, it didn't work. So that was when I mentally knew now that this was going to be a battle. Like, that things were it's not just that simple. A couple of months later, well, one thing that anybody will recognize, anybody that's going through the infertility process, is that you also have a sense of urgency in your spirit when when you're going through it, because you're like, okay, this could be my chance. This could be my chance. There's no time to waste. Like, my body's still like, everything is always like, let's go to the next thing because something's going to work and it's going to work next time. Like, they just keep trying. Like, and obviously that's not how it works in the medical system either, because it's like, okay, this IUI failed, your IVF cycle failed, like it didn't work. Let's stop and think about what it is that we can do differently the next time. Because I kept hearing the same conversation coming up. They kept saying endometriosis is its own beast, it's its own thing, it's not going to work. Like, it's not that it's not going to work, it's not something you can predict. And for me, especially since the kind of person I am, I'm an attorney, I'm like very fact-based, especially. I'm very fact and argument-based in general. And so I'm the kind of person that, like, if you're telling me I have this and we do this, why can't this cure this? Like, so it was really, really hard for me to digest that information, to like wait and move on to the next thing. But thankfully it wasn't too long. They were like, okay, you've had a lot of hormones in your system, so let's pause. We have to go back to the beginning and start with your next period and do a baseline ultrasound to make sure that your body has calmed down from all of the drama. So we did that. But thankfully, we didn't have to wait too long. It was like maybe a month in between. Like, we started trying again. I think I got my period like the first week in December or something. And then we started trying again in January. Like, they came in and said, okay, so we can do this again. We'll go with a different protocol. So they kind of tampered everything down and we used a different protocol. And this time it was IVF. So they used a different kind of, I guess, dose of the same drugs. And I got follicles. I was so excited. And this time they were like, okay, no, you're actually going to make it to retrieval. And so we made it to retrieval. And that was its own process. I had to go on that. And then they let you know how it's going to go. You just retrieve the eggs and they'll let you know when you wake up how many you have. And then you start waiting to see how those eggs do overnight each night until either the 3rd day or the 5th day. So they had explained that to me. And I was like looking forward to having, what I understood was that the 5th day would be like embryos that make it to the 5th day would be, they'll pick some to freeze. And, you know, those ones are the ones that are usually really strong and have a better chance of doing well when you do the transfer. So they did mine and they told me they retrieved 4 eggs. So I was really happy, like 4 whole eggs. That's amazing. And out of those 4, 2 were actually mature, I believe, and 2 fertilized. Okay. So those numbers were very disappointing for like someone relatively young and that hadn't had any, like, you know, like they didn't really say there was going to be an issue per se. So they did the retrieval and it was 4 and then only 2 for it was 2, I believe. I can't remember, like it's a blur now every now and then, but they told me that okay, at least we can hope that these 2 make it to the end and then they will do the transfer. Yeah, that was the plan. And I started waiting. The 2, I now really started feeling really encouraged because the 2 kept going and it was making it through the days. But on the 3rd day, they were like, okay, since it's only 2, they don't want to risk them not maturing to the 5th day. So they're just going to go ahead and give them a better chance inside you by transferring them. So they did that. And as usual, they did like another day, another story after another 2 weeks waiting. Yeah. And it was just absolutely devastating because you think that this almighty IVF is what's going to work for you. And as usual, it was the same conversation. Endometriosis is its own monster. We don't know what's going to happen. This is how it's going to be. And so that's how it just really continued that way. I did the next time because of my endometriosis, which is something I didn't know about. Apparently, like endometriosis can also cause your shells of your eggs to be a bit harder, so it's harder to penetrate or something like that. This is something I didn't know. Like I said, it's always something new. Yeah. And so they wanted me to wait 6 months and see, actually go on Lupron. For anybody that has endometriosis, I'm sure they know, whether if not Lupron, they know something related to it where it kind of just mutes your body. Yeah. And like puts you in a dull state so that you can see maybe your body can, you know, at least calm down from all the inflammation and then try again. And that's what we did. We waited and I was on Lupron and its horrible side effects of like hot flashes and just like terrible moods and like everything. And we did Lupron for a while, then got on the IVF horse again. We tried again, like with the IVF, another IVF cycle, and this time, because I think a combination of the Lupron, the combination of, I decided to change my diet as well, and make sure that I wasn't eating foods that would really flare my situation up. I cut soy and things like that. I believe like everything was like it was a whole combination of its whole self, and I was able to get they got 10 eggs actually. They got 10, but only 5 were mature, 4 fertilized. And so then like 4 fertilized, and then I was able to wait to the 5th day, and only 3 made it to the 5th day for freezing. So that's how that was the whole process. We did a transfer again of 2 of them, and it still did not work. It still did not work. I always get to that point where you just always feel like, okay, so this one is going to work. Like it's going to work now because everything's working out, and it still did not work. So it became its own, even to the point that for right after that appointment, after the disappointing news anyway, we went to the doctor again to discuss what the next steps were. And even him, he's like, well, like I actually have to, all of us in the practice are going to have to consult and see
what to do.
We'll let you know what our options are. Like, we'll let you know what your options are. And it really, like, the tone was changing. The tone was changing in my spirit. The tone was changing in my doctor's office. The tone was changing everywhere, because you just become so heartbroken that this is going on for so long and things aren't working. And so we waited again. We waited a couple of months. We just kept, like, it just always ended up becoming a weight of its own. And then they contacted me and wanted to try something new, because they were worried that also another thing that the endometriosis could be causing was maybe that I wasn't implanting. Maybe like the embryos weren't able to implant because of like some flare-ups within my womb, or like my womb, or like, like things. Like the thing is, nobody had a definite answer, because all of this is really up to like these small numbers that you start to hear. Like you start to hear things like, oh, it's really only a 20% chance, or I don't even know what the percentage, don't quote me, but like it's really only a 20% chance that you can get pregnant naturally anyway, like regardless of if you have endometriosis or not. Like every cycle is already a crapshoot, so like adding endometriosis into it now really starts to diminish your chances. So I decided, like, I just kept, one thing that I knew was I was just going to keep trying. Like I was just going to keep trying. And obviously I'm fortunate enough that I was able to at least find a way to afford these treatments, because in the state that I was, at least in based on the insurance that I had, it wasn't covered. Fertility treatments weren't covered. So like it really started to weigh on us financially as well, but at least we were still able to keep going. By now we're in 2017. And it's been going on for so long, but like it's so funny when I'm looking back now. The numbers don't sound that crazy. Like, oh, it was only 4 years you were trying. Like it's not that terrible. But then when you're in there, every single day feels like the longest day of your life. Every single day, every single time somebody is opening, like somebody looks at you and is like, oh, so how far? Like, are you guys going to try getting pregnant soon? Every single day is pain. Like it becomes a year in your head. And it's like, whether it's 3 months, whether it's 6 months, like when you're struggling with that infertility, like nothing else matters, because your body keeps disappointing you in the thing that you're trying to make it do. And it's truly something that I do not wish on my worst enemy, because everybody's just always like, we're all conditioned to keep it quiet while we're going through it. And it's already a bad situation when you have endometriosis, because you're conditioned to tell yourself that you're overreacting about your pain. You're conditioned to tell yourself that, like it's supposed to still wake up every morning and go and do something, like, or the other, and attend to other people when you're dying inside from the pain that you're going through. And then add in infertility into that. Not only do you feel like crap, but then also like you're not getting the results that you're expecting from what you're doing. So it really just became its own monster. They wanted to test my implantation. They did something called an endometrial receptivity array, or something called ERA. And it was like some test that they were now doing. It was from Sweden or something. And they basically just do an endometrial biopsy of your uterus, of your endometrial lining, or whatever. Sorry, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know the words, but like They do a biopsy, a uterine biopsy, and then they send it there to see what your actual windows of ovulation and implantation are, like when your body's peak for implantation. And so they did that. They sent it out. Apparently, what used to, like, this technology had gotten to the point they'd be able to tell you, narrow it down to, I think, actually like a 4 or 6 hour window of when you would be implanting. So that's when they would need to do the transfer. So you just keep going, like, so that's what we did. We did that, and they came back, and they were able to narrow down my window. I think, apparently, I was hoping that they would come back and tell me that my window was wrong completely. Like, so we've been getting it wrong all this time. And they're like, no, girl, it just says exactly, it's exactly when they said it was. Like, they expected I was implanting. But, like, I don't know if that's the exact window they had been using before, but they were like, they're going to just basically, since my test came back as receptive, and it says that was when I was in, like, peak for implantation, they're going to just repeat that cycle with one frozen embryo that I had and do the transfer. And in April, that's what we did. And for the first time in, like, my entire life, I got pregnant. And so like, it was literally the one gift, like my one
last embryo.
Like, it was something. It was like, it wasn't, I can't even say it's one thing or the other. It was just like, that was the first time that my husband and I had seen the positive pregnancy test.
Yeah.
And it was the beginning of our new life. Like, that was the minute that every single aspect of, like, this whole story just changed for us. And so yeah, we got pregnant, and because of my history and because of my multiple IVFs and multiple everything, they put me on progesterone from the second, like, maybe like a couple of days after, like, they had done the transfer. I had to take, I don't know, like, if anybody's familiar with IVF, like, in all my IVF cycles, I had to take Xanax, like, to calm my body so that when they're doing the transfer, your body doesn't flare up.
Right.
So, like, it's important that you ask for whatever you can to calm yourself, because it's really, really stressful during the transfer. That's something that I didn't mention. Like, it's super, like, you start getting anxiety that it's not going to work. Like you now start freaking out, and then I don't even know. But I can't even point. I just know that was my time to have. Like, obviously, looking back, it was the time. It was everything. It was a combination of God's miraculous gift for us. But yeah, I got pregnant, and I was on progesterone and monitored on, actually, throughout my pregnancy. I was monitored from 5 weeks up until my son was born. Because of the endometriosis, they didn't know, they said, okay, I'd gotten pregnant now, and as long as I make it past, like, a particular point. But beyond endometriosis to IVF also has its own risks in terms of, like, a successful pregnancy. So they wanted to watch. It wasn't even about the endometriosis anymore now. It was about the IVF and making sure that everything was, like, successful. So we did that, and then I got some complications towards the end, like 36 weeks in, and it was my fluid in my system. Like, I don't know if it was, if the doctor said it didn't have anything to do with IVF, but it could be something to do with the endometriosis, but they can't tell. But it was like, I started getting a lot, like, my amniotic fluid was a lot. And so they were worried that they wanted to make sure the baby was okay. They did all the tests. And so I had to have a C-section towards, like, 3 weeks before my son's due date. But beyond that, everything was completely fine. And we're here now. It's been 2 years since, my son's 1.5. And so it's just incredible. Like, that's my entire story. And I'm sorry it was so long.
No, it was interesting. And it's the beginning of your story is very similar, especially because it's endometriosis. It's very similar and very familiar with many of us and what we've been through or what we're going through. So knowing that you went from, having endometriosis, being in pain all the time, to, having excision surgery and then having at least a better quality of life. Yeah. And then going from that to also the IVF process and, multiple cycles and then having your baby, it gives me so much hope and it makes me so happy. And it shows you how strong we are and what our bodies are able to endure. So Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm holding on to your testimony and your story, and I'm hoping that, you know, it will happen for me and for many other women out there.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much. So, do you have any tips that you would give anyone that is currently experiencing IVF in terms of food, exercise, well-being? So everything from maybe the process of getting ready for egg stimulation and retrieval to freezing and then implantation. What tips would you give anyone out there?
Well, okay, so I have, I don't even know. Funny enough is that, like I said, I wasn't really familiar with so many things about endometriosis when I was getting, like, you know, when I was going through it. But IVF, I decided to arm myself with as much information as possible from the beginning. Like, I feel like with IVF, especially since it takes so much from you throughout, like it's not like it's a 1 week thing. It's a whole, like it's months of your life at a time. Yeah. It's really important that you advocate for yourself as much as possible. Like, make sure you know what you're talking about too, so that when the doctor starts using all these big words, you're able to say, okay, but what is this protocol better for me than this protocol? Or mention that. I know if they find it annoying, but at the end of the day,
it's your life, right?
It's your life at the end of the day, and it's you, it's your life, it's your money, it's your, you know what I mean? Like it's your fertility on the line as well. So like it's really, like, I'm sure between my sister and I, the words that we even knew, my husband's actually a doctor as well, he's a pediatrician. So he tends to just, you know, he's more sane and level-headed. But my sister and I just kept coming with facts. Like, okay, so this person said, by facts, I mean, this is what another mother went through. Like, this person said that. It's really important for you to at least speak up about that. And then I think for me, I can't say that this is what worked or this wasn't worked. As you can hear from, I haven't even said a lot of it, but I went through numerous cycles. So it's not, I can't say that one thing worked separate from the other, but I think you should ask about implantation, ask about those kind of things, ask about, and then as far as your body is concerned, during maybe like in between the third and the fourth cycle, I started to take my fitness seriously. I'm not like, you know, a gym person or anything like that, but then I started to try and eat a bit healthier. So I started to cut out a lot of sugar because I had read that endometriosis really loves the sugar. So, and like, you know, and not just endometriosis, I think PCOS as well is affected by the like foods that can cause inflammation in your body. So I tried to cut back. I actually cut back significantly on that. I went on like, you know, a real less carb binge and like, you know, started working on like protein and things like that. And I felt better. So I felt like my body was also feeling better in general in terms of how, like, because it was helping with my pain. So it wasn't eliminating my pain, but I felt like the food aspect also was, I basically was down to try anything at that point, like to contribute to it. Also, obviously with IVF, like gym is not really an option once you start going through the like stimulation part of things. So I just tried to take things as simple, easy as possible. I feel like my first 2 cycles, I was so agitated. Like I was so anxious about everything. Like, you know, the kind of thing where your heart is just beating all the time because you can't, like I almost had an accident one day when I was driving back from one of my appointments. And it was just really because I was really, really intensely, like there's so much at stake and you want it to work really, really bad. But I feel like there's also a lot that we can support it with when we're like, you know, internally. And also with IVF, I didn't have this problem, but I know a few people that had the hyperstimulation problem when they were doing the IVF from, like, you know, for some people that are more sensitive to the hormones. So it's really important that you speak up for yourself and let them know right away so that you're not endangering yourself. So I feel like those were the things for me. And lastly, and most importantly, like I wouldn't, if I was looking back, I wouldn't have put so much, like I would have prepared myself more mentally to know that doesn't mean that it might not work on the first try. I know how devastated I was about it not working. It really set me back. I did, like, emotionally, I just was not in a good place for like a year because I was so sure that this was the answer that was going to work. Yeah. So I was just ready to try any. As time moved on, as I grew into the process, I was ready to try anything to get pregnant. But like in the beginning, I was sure that, but I was putting too much pressure on each step that it became it was not great for me emotionally, not at all. So yeah. But I'm hoping that everybody that's listening is able to get their own big fat positive and just like, move on from this process, so that it's not something that just buries you constantly like it did for me.
So what would you say was or is your biggest source of strength? How did you cope? I know you said it was really hard and devastating, especially during the IVF, but what kept you grounded? What gave you strength?
Well, I believe in God, so like I grew in my spirituality for sure in this whole process. Like it was like, I mean, honestly, when you have nowhere else to run to at the end, like once you realize that there's nothing, like, do you know what I mean? Like you're just exhausted. Then you start to find that you when you start discovering a new strength within yourself, like it becomes a thing. But I feel like my biggest strength for me was my support system. Like between my husband, my friends that knew, my mother-in-law, like there was just and my sister. Like I get emotional when I talk about it, because they everybody carried the matter on their head, for lack of a better way to say it. Everybody, like it became a thing where it was like, okay, so we aren't getting pregnant, like it's all of us in this now. And I have a very supportive spouse, in the sense that like I don't know how he does it, but he knows just exactly how to be there for me emotionally, like in terms of like where to meet me. And my friends, I don't play with it, my friendships, because my friendships are like sisterhoods, like it's in my core. Like some of my best human beings were there for me at that time. So yeah, it's definitely your support system. I feel like with infertility and with endometriosis or any kind of chronic illness, it's very isolating. It's something that makes you like, you remove it from everybody and you start to compare yourself to other people. Like, this person's getting pregnant, we're not. Like, what conversation can she have with me? Like, you know what I mean? Like, nobody knows what I'm actually going through. I am devastated. I'm in the abyss of my feelings and I am alone. It always makes you feel like you are alone. But when it's the support system that brings you out of that and keeps reinforcing to the fact that you are not alone, and that there are other people that are going through it. Especially now, I know that there's so many people that are going through endometriosis, period. Like, there's so much that you can find. Just find that support system.
Let's talk about, life in general. Now that you have experienced endometriosis and hopefully the back of it.
Yes, hopefully.
And IVF, and you have your baby. How do you balance life, mom life, work life, and your health? How do you do it all?
Well, I mean, one thing that I can say is, like, through this process, I've also seen like where I could, like, I've learned to prioritize. I've learned to prioritize my life in general. Like, I have a full-time job, but then I was also running a wedding inspiration website. So I think that during this process, I also found like more of my purpose, and I wanted to talk about much more than just weddings. I wanted to talk about everything else. Like, there's other stuff that we're going, like the other things that we can also celebrate beyond weddings. I feel like weddings are not the end all or be all of like a woman's life cycle at all. So it's actually just one option, in fact. So I just focused more and more, and I have focused more and more about providing that happy and providing that, like, safe space and remove space for women to like just be about other things, so that it's not every time that we're just being about being a mom or like being a bride or anything like that. And then in terms of like juggling my life, like I don't even know if juggling is a real thing. For me, and I always say this, I've redefined what full-time means for me. So I'm in the office now 4 out of 5 days a week, sometimes 3, and then I'm working on other things at the same time, or like, and then I have my son now. So there's no balance, but I'm just, basically prioritizing things differently now. So that's how it's going. But that's what I'm doing. I found a purpose in the sense that I'm hoping, and I hope I'm able to inspire other women that have endometriosis, and to realize, and even women that have gone through failed IVF cycles, that you are able, and you will, like, it's okay. Like, it might not be working out right now, and it might be completely bleak right now, but there has to be a silver line. There has to be something at the end of this tunnel. I'm hoping, and like I said, I've spoken to so many people after since I shared my story, and a lot of people have finally found their positives. Somebody that I know has gone through it for years, like 10 years of infertility, and she has finally had her positive, whether it's through adoption, whether it's through like the IVF, whether it's through like, whatever choice you make. It's okay, whatever choice you make. It doesn't matter how you end up, but you will have your happy ending. That's how I feel, and I'm hoping that that's what I'm able to inspire people to feel as well.
Oh, thank you. I've definitely felt inspired, and I love your story, and I'm happy that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm really thankful for you, and I'm hoping that people that hear your story will know that they as well, like you said, they can overcome this hurdle. They can overcome this process, no matter how long it feels like they're in that situation for so long, because endometriosis, infertility, it's a waiting game. It's one of those things that you can't say when it will be over, basically chronic, So, but, hearing your story has really inspired me, and because I know what you do in terms of your lovely gasp inspiring ideas, and making people know that it's not, it's like it feels like a safe space or a happy place to go to.
A happy place, exactly. That's what I'm hoping.
Yes, so thank you so much for that, and thank you for all you do. Thank you for sharing your story, and I'm hoping we speak again soon.
Yes.
Kunbi said something that really struck me. She said endometriosis is time sensitive and gets worse with time. So the older you get in your reproductive years, I guess the more complicated endo can get. Unfortunately, endometriosis diagnosis times are still abysmal. 7 to 10 years is unacceptable, and this is why we have to continue to talk about this. I'm really thankful for this platform that allows me to be able to listen to other women share their experiences, and also hopefully reach out to many other women out there going through the same. I want you to know, if you are experiencing infertility right now, that you are not alone. I know how hard it can be knowing that this disease could potentially, or even has robbed you of your ability to carry your own babies in your own hands. But I just want to say, don't give up. You are not alone. There are many avenues to love on a little human, whether through assisted reproduction, surrogacy, adoption, or even fostering. Don't give up on your dream, and continue to advocate for yourself. Until next time, I am Teniola Ogunro, and remember, you are not defined by Endo.